Hi, I'm Michelle Carr, Creative Director at Habit Action. Welcome to our Design to Work podcast series, where we have honest conversations with industry experts. This is our technology and media series, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Moriarty from Audiem. So Chris, co-founder Audiem.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's fantastic that you're here. Can we start by really telling me a bit about yourself and how your journey started?
Well, I mean, I could take you all the way back to school if you want, but let's try and keep it relevant to this sector, this industry. So I've been in and around sort of workplace and facilities management for best part 10 years, just over 10 years now. And that kind of I came in kind of left field. So my career, the first part of it was in professional bodies. So I worked for the Chartered Institute of Marketing, and I kind of just thought I'd go from professional body to professional body. Mm-hmm. And I did for a bit. I went to the British Institute of Facilities Management. That was my kind of introduction. And I don't know, I've always been a kind of a people-focused kind of guy. I like the kind of social sciences, all that sort of stuff. And I kind of came into FM and it was very technical. I mean, it's not like, it's still technical today, but it was really technical. It was like hard FM engineering, all the rest of it. And I was a bit worried about the decision I'd made, because I'd loved the idea of marketing and brands and all this. And someone introduced me to a group of people at the Institute that were trying to explore a kind of more people-focused version of facilities management, which essentially we were calling workplace. And, it sounds daft now because it's what we're all saying, but back then it was kind of quite rebellious. So there was a chap called Chris Kane, who was essentially my kind of workplace mentor for a period of time. And once I kind of pulled the curtain back and saw workplace experience, workplace leadership, even workplace design, all these things, it reminded me so much of the principles that I'd seen in marketing. I think I probably had more like survival instinct than anything, kind of got drawn to it. Yeah. So that was the kind of start of the journey. But, I've been involved in some fairly big projects almost by accident that I think are sort of maybe not industry defining, but certainly pushed a conversation on. So there was one called the Workplace Conversation, which we did with CIPD. I was involved in something called the Stoddart Review, which was a kind of facilities management's attempt to kind of translate what they do into sort of business language. I joined Leesman for a period, and that 3 years I was with them, they kind of went from this sort of just past startup to very established brand across the thing. So I sort of accidentally ended up in some fairly major kind of milestones and moments in this sort of evolving sector. Not least, I went back to the Institute and was there when they changed their name to the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management. So that's kind of been me. But I suppose a constant, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but the constant has been, I'm always really drawn to that kind of data-led, sort of researchy workplace experience survey kind of stuff. I find that stuff really interesting. I love trying to understand people, which I think comes from my marketing heritage. And that's kind of that's been the constant throughout all of this.
It sounds like the people is literally being the constant.
Well, I mean, look, I do a podcast myself, and one of the, I sort of make sure when I'm talking to guests, sometimes I ask these questions. Never run a building, never designed a building. So I remember when I became a freelancer, I was kind of struggling to how to describe myself. I'm like, I'm coming out of the safety of a brand and safety of an organization. For a while I was the MD for the UK at Leesman, that made sense. And then I was Director of Insight at IWFM, that made sense. And then I was just Chris. And people are like, well, are you a workplace expert? And I was like, oh, no, I'm not comfortable with that for that reason. I haven't done the job. I kind of settled on this idea of being like a workplace commentator, because that's something I kind of quite enjoy. I like kind of sitting back from it and sort of going, I can see some shapes here. I can see what's happening here. Isn't it interesting that this? So that's kind of, that's the bit I love. And I think part of the reason I'm drawn to the people part of it is because that commentary role, because I've not got a foot in either party really. I'm not trying to operate a space. I'm not occupying a space as a kind of an employee. I can always sit back and see how those two things bump into each other. And I spent a lot of my time now sort of talking to organisations about what their people think about what they're doing. So I think if I was a bit too close to either side of that equation, I'd almost be a bit too biased. So it kind of suits me to be a bit of an observer and try and help tell a story about what I'm seeing. And that's kind of my thing, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable position.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. No, some people might not agree, but yeah, absolutely.
I think it's really intriguing, to be able to sit there and just watch, observe, and
it sounds a bit creepy when you put it like that, though, Michelle. I don't just watch, just like watching you guys. But no, I agree. But I think I was talking to someone about this the other day. We were having a conversation about innovation, and I said, like, sometimes you're so close to something.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of need a bit of distance from a problem, and that's the benefit I've always had, is I can sort of ask questions and try and be a bit kind of challenging or provocative. I quite enjoyed being a freelancer, and when I was a freelancer, I think people sometimes think I'm a workplace consultant, which again, it's not a job I've ever done, and I wouldn't want to do. I was freelance. I was helping organisations like adjust their brands and adjust their products and narrative around workplace ideas. And again, it was really, I saw organisations that's like, we're all about well-being, and I'm like, but are you though? Like, you can't just word salad your way out of this. You got to really feel it. If that is what you're about, then let's see how that translates. So I kind of like having. I mean, some people might suggest it avoids me actually having to do anything and prove that I don't know or do know. But I think there's a role for that kind of challenge and commentary that kind of takes you away from it a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely digging into that marketing background, aren't you? You're getting to the crux of it. What are you about? What are you? What's your impact?
Yeah, definitely.
That's brilliant. Oh gosh. So it's really interesting taking us through about your journey. And what inspired you to create Audiem?
Well, do you know what? I'm not sure how much inspiration there was. It was more like a kind of moment. So to give you a little bit of the story behind it. So I mentioned I was a freelancer. So I was doing my freelancing work. And a couple of chaps that I'd done some work with before at the Institute, Ian Ellis and James Pinder, got in touch with me and said, we'd like to run something past you. I said, yeah, great. And then got really intriguing when they sent me an NDA. I was like, okay, I've got an NDA. That's quite exciting, isn't it? My son said, so what are you about to tell me? And they came to me and they said, look, we've got this idea. How much do you know about machine learning? Now, Audiem, I was telling someone today, Audiem has been around longer than ChatGPT has been on the market, right? So, whilst it seems odd today to talk about machine learning like it was some sort of, massive innovation, because let's face it, it's on our phones now, right? Which is kind of a tipping point, I think. At the time, I was like, well, I get it. I know what it is, but, I couldn't tell you much more than that, really. And what Ian and James had done through their consultancy business is try to explore how organisations, when they were doing their kind of employee feedback work, they were sort of frustrated because they're researchers, they're academics at heart, and they prefer qualitative input rather than quantitative. And they were sort of going, well, how can we scale that up? Now, James, who's the kind of tech whiz behind Audiem, he's the kind of real genius. He'll be terribly embarrassed that I've said that. But whilst the rest, I sort of joke, I said, whilst the rest of us were like learning how to make soda bread during the pandemic, he was going, I wonder what I could do with AI. He's that sort of guy.
Yeah.
So he had sort of built a kind of prototype for taking written answers from employees rather than scoring something, a written answer that kind of explained, and they sort of use your machine learning to label and quantify and rate and rank and do all that sort of stuff. And so they were taking me through it, and there was just sort of this moment, and it kind of takes me back to my time at Leesman, because, they've done incredible things, and very proud to be part of that journey about creating this benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a kind of a gap between, like, the question was always, what next? We've got this sort of score now. And one of the questions I got asked about all the time, I'd go and present these reports, is that, I might say that something was below average or something was above average.
Mm-hmm.
The question that came back was why?
Yeah.
Why do you think and, we had loads of stories about clients that had learned something, but really we didn't know, because our job there was to score it, rank it, benchmark it, tell you where you're placed on it. And what I saw with this qualitative stuff was, hold on a minute, this is going to explain why people feel like they feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it kind of tickled that, what we talked about before, that kind of curiosity that I've got, which I blame on my Irish heritage. I think the Irish are probably the most curious people on the planet, for better or for worse sometimes. But, you know, you sit there and go, God, what do you think of that then? Why, that's interesting. You thought it was, you know, and I just sort of saw this moment and I said to the guys, we've got to do something with this. Like, there's a need for this.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the start of the journey. That was 2021, I think, where they started talking to me about it. And it wasn't really until 2022. I remember it was October 22, standing on stage at Workplace Trends Conference with VMO2, who were one of our earliest clients, still a client today, and just sort of showing people what we'd done.
Yeah.
And it's evolved a lot, but that was it. It was really what drove it was this kind of thinking, oh, we could unlock something here that I think was a missing piece of a puzzle.
Yeah.
And the way I look at stuff like that, I mean, I'm not a builder in a technical sense. You know, I saw the market for it, I suppose, you know, going back to my kind of commercial and marketing and sales kind of background. You don't get opportunities like that very often to bring something new that you think could change a market. And, you know, it's not been easy, but I think we're starting to see, it sounds a little bit arrogant, like the market catching up. But what I mean by that is we wanted to get out ahead of everybody because, you know, we didn't know this at the time, but with OpenAI coming out and ChatGPT kind of exploding.
Yes.
Although how far it's exploded is, you know, a bit relative because it's essentially a kind of knowledge worker kind of tool. When your nan's using it, that's when we know we've really kind of hit that moment. But if we could do it, then someone else could. But I guess by coming out before all that explosion, we've really, like, we've learned a lot about the art of the possible, what works, what doesn't work, how to structure it. There's a lot more that goes into it than just flinging it into an AI. And and that's been the sort of journey. I'm glad I took the punt because the lads had really taken it to a point. But I think what I brought to the equation is, how do you turn it into something that people want?
Yes.
And package it in a certain way and essentially commercialize it. It sounds a bit cold, but how do you make it desirable? Because functionality is one thing, but a product's much more than the functionality. It's the kind of total offer. And that was the thing that excited me the most, just the opportunity to try and launch something. You know, a lot of jobs you're kind of picking up from someone else and iteratively taking it on.
Yes.
And I was really kind of buzzed with the opportunity to take something new in.
Yeah.
Buzz is probably not the word I would describe. The early years it was real graft, but it was that kind of virgin territory that I was just like, yeah, let's have a go at this.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think, you know, yeah, I mean, it is. It's really quite inspiring because it is, for me, also about the why. And it's the people and the why. What's the purpose? What, you know, what, you know, you do all those surveys, you have all of that data, but actually it's the human, and why doesn't it work?
Yeah.
Why could it, you know, that's the whole question that I think that needs answering. And, you know, it's good that, you know, we can collect all of this data, as you say, but the ultimate aim, we're trying to get people into the office, you know, why they're not coming. Why does it work?
What you're talking about, what you're touching on there is something I sort of talk about, line charts and guesswork, because, you know, I've even seen it at conferences where, you know, someone might be presenting a PhD or something. And I hear phrases like, we think this is because we think this is, I'm not doubting anyone's interpretation or expertise, but surely if we're going to start making decisions on this stuff, we kind of got to know, like, we've got to know that's the case. And actually that's one of the wonderful things about the sort of data we pick up, because, you know, you can sit there. I always use coffee because that seems to be the kind of baseline for most experiences, you know, how's the coffee? But, you know, if you're dissatisfied or unhappy with a coffee offer, is it the barista? Is it the price? Is it the queue length? Is it the range? Is it the milk options? Is it how many floors you got to get to? Like, what is it about it? Because if we just know that you don't like the coffee, we don't know why, and therefore we don't know what to fix or to adjust. And equally, you might fix one thing, but cause an issue somewhere else. And you don't know that until you sort of explain to people that go, oh, do you know, it's great now that you do this, but the price of that extra milk, and you're like, okay, right, fine. So, and that I think gets us into a situation where workplace teams now can genuinely and confidently test and learn. Let's do a thing. Did it work? No. Okay, let's understand why it didn't. Adjust, iterate, move on.
Yeah. In
the same way, I remember years ago listening to director of marketing at YouTube, and this is in 2010, right?
Wow. All that time ago.
All that time ago, right? Oh, geez, 16 years ago. Wowzers, right. And what they were talking about is digital marketing. It was a thing at the time. Digital marketing this, emails that, website this.
Yeah.
And he said, look, there's going to be a situation where we don't call it digital marketing anymore. We just call it marketing. And he said it's in the same way that we don't call it the electric kettle anymore. It's just the kettle. Now, those sorts of labels are useful at the kind of genesis of these ideas, because it's a kettle. Is it a hob or is it an electric? Oh, no, it's an electric kettle. But now all kettles are electric.
Yeah.
All marketing is basically digital. There's still some bits of it. And it won't be long until all computing is AI. And so we won't need to call it that anymore. And I think that's the thing. If you sort of lean too much into the AI, when that disappears, then what are you? As long as there's some value left over, when we take that kind of glitzy, glamorous veneer away, are you still delivering value?
Yeah.
You'll be using AI technology, machine learning technology. But if you're not delivering value, then it's a waste of time.
Absolutely. It's going to become the norm.
Yeah.
I think, our kind of task, probably where I sit, it's really about understanding what's out there, what it can do to help. It's a tool. And, I mean, I've been in this industry now over almost 3 decades. When we first used to kind of get a pack of drawings out to a joinery company, it used to go by fax.
Yeah, right.
Or you waited a week to get a drawing pack out in the post. Now it's all instant.
Yeah.
But, if we take it into the world of 3D visualization, for example, it's all about bringing the personal experience and that human experience into that kind of product that you're selling, into that environment that you're selling, because you're showing how people will use that space in the same way as, one of the girls in our office, such a whiz where it comes to technology and AI. And I work very flow-like, and, it doesn't come in a list. It comes in a mind map. I'll have a conversation and I download it onto a mind map. The only way I could then transfer those learnings that I'd had in a conversation was to put it on a mind map. I sent it to her, and I mean, there was half a dozen mind maps, and she's like, there's no way I could have done that. She fed it into AI, told it what to do, and it did a document for her. And I was like, wow, how didn't I know how to do that?
Well, I mean, the
but
thing
it just saves so much time.
It does, but then we also need to be careful as well. There's a meme that's doing the rounds at the minute, and it's this sort of graphic. Someone was telling me about this the other day. This sort of graphic where there's kind of an assistant with 9 bullet points in front of them going, geez, I've got to turn this into a 30-page report. So feeds it into the AI and goes, give me a 30-page report, and then sends it to the boss. And the boss looks at it and goes, geez, 30-page report. Better turn this into 9. It puts it into the AI and says, can you turn this into 9 bullet points? So I do think the thing is you do need to, like, the big theme at the moment is actually like, and there's an organisation I have an involvement with, they talk about human in the middle, and you still need to be a subject matter expert. You still need to critically assess these outputs. But you're right, like the real value at the minute is this shortening of time. What will be interesting to see, I think, as this evolves, is what do we do with that extra time? Because if we just put more processes in and more kind of admin in, we've kind of wasted the opportunity. Whereas if actually we sit down, and I'm talking at an event next month about innovation. This is what I was talking about earlier. And they're saying, what's a big barrier to innovation? Like time. We haven't got enough time. Well, maybe we can create time by alleviating some of those manual processes, which is the story of technology, right? Go back to your thing about fax machines.
Yeah.
Well, when email came in, it shortened that down. And then when instant messaging came in, it shortened that down. The problem is you end up like work is like a goldfish, like it grows to the size of the space that you allow it to. So, we've kind of, I think it's a story as old as time, as we've sort of had a opportunity to create more capacity. We filled it up real quick.
Oh, yeah.
And then we'll be here in 10 years' time going, I still haven't got the time. All these tools were supposed to make me more productive, but I'm still slogging.
You just do more, don't you? You get more time.
I forget the title, though. There's a book that's like More Jobs for Mother. And it's essentially looking at the domestic appliance market and how, in the 50s and the 60s, all these like the washing machine. And, the mother at home won't need to, you can imagine there's some sort of 1950s chap going, it wasn't this lovely? And then mother would be able to do it. There was this sort of idea that they were going to like just float around the house doing nothing, but there was more jobs to do. And then the dishwasher came out. This will save so much. You always fill the gap, and it's just what you fill the gap with.
Absolutely. I'll not bring the working mother into that equation because there's even more hats and more things to bring in.
Exactly that.
Especially mum of twins.
Yeah.
Or a dad of twins.
Yeah. That's a whole different podcast.
Absolutely. Wow. It definitely took us on a little bit of a journey, but I think that's the point of these conversations, isn't it? If we were to come back to the crux of what Audiem actually does, can you give us a...
Yeah, I suppose if I take you back to that moment where we were looking at qualitative, written, unstructured feedback, that was the innovation, that was the technology. I suppose then what you do is you have this sort of situation where you launch something into what you think you're launching into a market, and the market has a tendency to tell you what you've actually launched into the market. So what occurred for us over time, and we've got some flagship clients, early adopters basically, and NatWest are one of them, and they've been amazing for us. But one of the things that they challenged us with is, what else can we put in? Like, what else could go in? We've got this data, can that go in? And over time, we sort of realised that one of the big value adds that we have is organizations are sitting on stacks of this stuff, stacks of it. Like, it's not just the workplace survey, it's the catering feedback, it's the FM contract performance, it's the capital project, it's FM help desk tickets. There's so many written bits of insight in an ecosystem of an organization. So what we do now is we work with organizations to essentially scoop all that up and put it into one place. And then what we're regardless of how it was collected, who collected, what system it was, as long as you can export it from a system, you can import it into Audiem. Now, there's a number of benefits to that. One being everything's in one place and not in different folders and files and spreadsheets and stuff. So you can get it all into one place. But we're also not just a data visualization tool. That's the machine learning bit. So we've got this kind of interpretation layer that does top-down labeling. So there's a set of themes and sub-themes that we've designed through our workplace experience, the papers we've written, the work that we've done, the consulting that's happened. And so there's a framework that we label from. We add to that a kind of topic generation functionality. So very quickly you can summarize massive swathes of data where common topics emerge and stuff. You rate and rank it and do all that sort of stuff. And then what you get is this sort of all in one place, but then the data's kind of, we work really hard to make sure the data speaks to you. So, even if it's just like you land on the homepage, you get a bit of volumetric stuff. How many people are talking about people issues, space issues, tech issues? Along the bottom, we've just got the 6, what we call resonant, what the top ranking resonant kind of things. And resonance we measure as a combination of this, the scale of the topic, so how often is it mentioned, but we combine it with the severity or the strength of sentiment, both positive and negative. And the sort of way we explain that is, I explain it is, if 1,000 people tell you about a leaky tap, but 5 people tell you about a flood in the bathroom, you want to know about the flood, right? Even though it's only 5 people. So it's that combination. So these are all sort of tools that we're trying to say, look, stick it in. It's all really quick. I mean, scarily quick, from Excel spreadsheet to to interpretation. But then once you're in it, you can then sort of filter and navigate and use a range of tools that we've got, because we want it to be a kind of ongoing dynamic resource. I mean, I think that's the last thing we're trying to help with organizations now, is to say, try and get your mindset away from big annual one-off surveys. They have a place, but why can't we be collecting this stuff all the time? Why can't you follow up a meeting room booking with a how was it? Why can't you have a QR code in your catering queue and all these sorts of things to just get this sort of smaller feedback loop where there's more stuff coming in more frequently, so that you can sort of get that kind of pulse of the workforce.
Yeah, and that's real time, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that was Audiem in a nutshell. That's a touch bigger than a nutshell, but that's the basic premise behind it.
Right, that's really interesting. It's huge, Chris. What drives you as the co-founder of Audiem, and what is your mission?
Geez. I suppose you go on a bit of a journey with, I think, when you sort of almost enter a persona as a co-founder, you're like, what should I be thinking about as a co-founder and stuff? And you certainly sort of, particularly when it's tech, there's that tendency to sort of think about, these big exits and, one day we're going to be here, or we could be a global brand and all the rest of it. I'd love all that stuff, don't get me wrong. But I think the thing that drives me, and it has, again, I was chatting to someone earlier on today, is that it's really tough the first 2 or 3 years, because one of the things I sort of talk about is that it would have been a lot easier to sell coffee cups, because I know these organizations need coffee cups. They know they need coffee cups. They've already got coffee cups. They've even got a budget line for coffee cups. And I can come in and say, how much are you paying per cup? And I might be able to undercut them, or I might be able to look at the performance of that cup. But when you're bringing something totally new, like I was, for a long while, I was talking to organizations and essentially trying to, land the idea that they didn't know they needed something like us, but they absolutely do need something like us. And until you kind of got that critical mass of case studies and use cases and all that sort of stuff, it's very difficult. And I was sort of reflecting on it and saying, if I looked at the kind of evidence of my own eyes of, when you're trying to grow the business, you'd probably stop. So there is something intangible that keeps you going. Now, I think Mrs. M would probably suggest it's stubbornness. I'm almost certain she would suggest it's stubbornness. But I think what it comes down to is that core belief that we can close the gap between employees and employers, right? It doesn't have to be this sort of adversarial, I think Rory Sutherland, amazing mind, the advertiser, he sort of talks about home working and this sort of idea that, employers kind of looked at the home working thing. So, well, it looks more productive, but they really like it, which means it can't be a good thing for us if they're really enjoying this. Let's row this back a bit, in his own sort of style. It doesn't need to be adversarial. I mean, one of the things that I see all the time is organizations almost scared to ask because they don't want to hear the result, because it's just going to be bad. It's going to be bad. But the reality is, when you start looking at the data we provide, quite often it's just employees that just want a slightly better thing or something to work a little bit better. It's never big scale stuff. And it sort of excites me that we now have the ability to kind of scale up that depth of insight. Whether it's us or other options, we've now got the opportunity to close that gap, and that's I guess that's what drives me, because one of the things, going right back to my kind of origin story with this sector, is that kind of marketing parallel, and I maintain, and I will continue to bang this drum and stand on this soapbox, that workplace professionals can learn so much from the marketing workforce, from the marketing ideas, because, let's take something one of the things I talk about is value exchange. And what the value exchange is what you sacrifice versus what you get. So every time we make a purchase, one of the sacrifices is you're giving money away, right? And what do you get in return? You then weigh that up and go, the return versus the sacrifice. If it's net positive, then that's a good purchase. If it's net negative, then I'm disappointed. Well, isn't that what we're talking about in the workplace now? Is the sacrifice, the commute, the cost of the commute. the lack of time with my family. Well, let's make sure that when I get there, it's worth it.
Yeah.
That's a marketing principle. And I think for me, that's what drives me, because what I think Audiem represents is a tool that allows workplace teams, organizations to take a more marketing style approach to this employee-employer workplace as a product mindset. And the more I see that, you know, when I hear about our clients that are really leaning into learning more about why people think about stuff, that's the thing that keeps me going, you know. And one of the best lessons I had about any sort of business, you know, there is a tendency to focus on financials and focus on performance, and that's, of course, it's important. I mean, I wouldn't be sat here talking to you about Audiem if we didn't sell anything, right? But actually, the trick is to focus on delivering the value, because if you get that right, the kind of financials take care of themselves. And that's something I've sort of learned over the last 2 or 3 years, is actually when do clients go value, and how do we help them get there? The rest takes care of itself. And for me, those moments where I can see that an organisation, a workplace team, are kind of experimenting with a new data. They've kind of almost got like a hypothesis. We want to test this out and see if we're going to learn from it. Brilliant, because we haven't done enough of that. You know, we just did one survey a year. You know, put our tin hat on, listened for a bit, took it off, squirreled away. Actually, just, you know, really leaning in, front-footed, opening your ears up, going, talk to us, and we'll keep this as a moving thing. Neil Asher talks about it as, you know, workplaces constantly being in beta, and that's it's the same idea, and I love it. And that, I think that's what drives me, and that's what, if I had a kind of personal mission statement, but of course it kind of blends into the Audiem mission statement. It's about giving workplace teams the insight they need to make better workplaces, but equally giving employees the platform, the ability to share their experience. And when you get those two things fused together, then hopefully we get better workplaces. And we can all agree better workplaces are a better thing, right? You know, they're going to improve performance, they're going to improve outcomes, they're going to improve health and well-being. That, you know, that's got to be what we're all striving for. We all got that kind of purpose. We all do it a slightly different way. And for Audiem, our role is we just want to do one thing really well. Make that voice make sense so that you can do something with it.
Yeah, so you've got that value. Fabulous. Some information there.